When we got to the top, we saw a light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside.
Religion is a subject that I usually tread lightly on because it's a hot button issue for a lot of people. There's a lot of controversy that comes along with it, and there's also a lot of differences in people's opinions, and most of the time it's strong opinions. I'll go ahead and say that I'm a Christian, but I have a lot of friends that have other religious practices as well as atheists and stuff like that, and I'm thankful that I live in a place that we all have the freedoms to enjoy whatever religion we have. Some people need spiritual connections, and religion is something that allows them to practice that. Now, I will say that there's some religious practices that are they're a little kooky, and the most of what we've seen in the past, historically, is things like cult practices. The mass suicide that a little while back happened a long while back happened with the cyanide flavored Kool-Aid or whatever, the cyanide laced Kool-Aid. Then they had the Manson family. I think that was considered a cult. They killed a bunch of people. There's historically, there's the whole David Koresh thing where they held out at the compound and the ATF was chasing them. That I remember that on the news when I was a kid. There was cults are responsible for some crazy things over time, you could say. So when I saw that there was a cult horror story, I was like, we gotta look into this. Listen, make sure to head over to Spook's channel, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and if you like reaction videos like this, click subscribe on this video as well. Let's get into the story.
I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and I remember me and my childhood friend Joe were outside all the time.
Yeah.
We loved pretending we were frontiersmen. We'd build shelters, traps, practice making fire with sticks, the whole 9 yards.
That's fun stuff.
When we got to be in high school, we got this notion to pull a Stand By Me. This was based on the movie of the same name that had just come out. The idea was that we'd walk the railroad tracks out in the country until we find a dead body on the side of the tracks.
Wait, what?
But instead of looking for a dead body, we'd find cool bridges to fish from and a camp little ways off the tracks.
Oh, that sounds fun, man. When he said looking for dead bodies, I was like, wait, y'all going to look for dead bodies? You don't just find those on the railroad track like in the movie. But seriously, man, we used to camp all the time. When I was a kid, I loved doing stuff like that, like gathering supplies, making fires, and having our own little adventures. When I was a kid, we did it in the backyards. I remember this one time, it was late afternoon, and we ended up having a little camping trip in my backyard, right? Just a little tent set up and a little fire. And I remember jumping the fence, going on one of our adventures, right? The neighbor had a peach tree. So me and my buddy jumped the fence and we went and we started picking his peaches. And actually it was a plum tree. It was those little yellow plums. Anyway, he came out and Ned from South Park, the guy with the trach and the electronic voice amplifier? There was a gentleman that had one of these things, and he came out, and we were kids. I had never seen this before, guys. I remember being horrified because he was like, "What are y'all doing in my peach tree? Get out of my yard right now." It was horrible. I know it's not something to make fun of, but man, it was so scary, dude. It was so scary as a kid. I'll never forget that. It's don't go picking people's peaches that plums that you don't know, okay? Just don't. Let's watch the rest of this.
After high school, me and Joe went our ways, but always stayed in touch and always tried to coordinate visits so we'd see each other occasionally.
Yeah.
Well, one summer in the mid-90s, it worked out that we were both in town for about a week. We'd do stuff with family in the day, and at night we'd either catch drinks at a bar or sit outside Joe's house around a fire and talk about the old days.
All right.
One night, me and Joe got to talking about our Stand By Me trips. Well, nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix.
Mm-hmm.
Soon we decided to take a day, walk the rails, camp one night, and walk home. The day came, we started out early morning. We had my wife drop us off in our old spot where we used to start, right outside our hometown. She thought this was absolutely crazy and made sure to mention it. When she pulled away, Joe suggested that instead of walking the usual route, we take the opposite direction, just to be adventurous.
Yeah, why not?
The day went fine. It was fun and a little sad, but in a good way. Before night set in, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick forested area, trees on every side of the train track, so you felt like you were in a tunnel.
That's cool.
Now, this is what we used to do in the old days too. We'd walk the area around a little bit to make sure some dude's house wasn't just over a hill and we were actually camping in their yard. We walked maybe 100 or so feet into the woods and up a small incline. We figured if we didn't see anything from on top of this short hill, we'd be fine.
Right.
But when we got to the top, we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. It was barely visible. We both assumed it was a sugar shack or something because there didn't appear to be a clear road into it. From where we were, there didn't look to be anyone in it either. All was quiet, no movement could be seen.
Alexa, what is a sugar shack?
Sugar shack is a noun meaning a building where sap from a sugar bush is boiled down to make maple syrup.
Oh. That's interesting. I'd never heard of a sugar shack. It makes sense. I thought it was some kind of love shack they were talking about or something. 100 yards off the woods, man. Just rent a motel,
No lights. We decided to walk a little closer just to make sure. We came down the hill very slowly, and as we neared the building, we saw it wasn't a sugar shack at all. It was an old church.
Oh.
It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was a squat, sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from years of moss and rot. A cross still stood on top of the place, also weathered black.
There you go.
None of the windows had glass, and there were no doors, just open doorways.
That's really
We
old.
got close enough to see
Wow.
inside. There were rows of pews and a built-up section in front for a preacher to stand. We left immediately and went back up the hill to our spot we had picked to camp.
Smart.
Night set in, and as we lay on our hammocks and shot the shit, we began to hear something in the direction of the church.
Uh-oh.
The conversation about it went a little like this. Do you hear that? What the fuck is that? It sounds like people singing. And it did just sound like singing. We both slid right out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two, and the singing continued, but it wasn't getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill and see if we could spy where the sound was coming from.
Oh, dang. Like, you gotta know, like, the singing in the background that I'm hearing right now is really, really creepy. That's like some horror music or stuff, right? But seriously, in the middle of the night, in a strange place, even as a grown man, if I heard some singing in the woods, I'd be creeped out. Look, singing, especially if you imagine if it was children singing, that's the scary stuff. But in horror movies, they always have this singing that is just like disembodied voices or anything like that. Oh gosh, it's so scary.
It still moved very quietly in the woods from the old days. It was second nature to us. The moon was barely out, but it provided enough light so you wouldn't walk right into a tree, but it was near pitch black. We didn't use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw a light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together and had a husk conversation that boiled down to, can you believe this?
No.
The light looked to be candlelight from the way it flickered, and though we tried, we couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat down, watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer either. No. We had about a football field length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit, and then it stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the shit out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you see in the movies, but again, it was like he was speaking a different language because we couldn't understand a single word.
Weird.
Eventually, it got to where the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that I covered my ears.
Gosh.
Then it stopped. At this point, I was just getting ready to say, let's get the hell out of here, when Joe put a hand on my shoulder and hissed, they're coming out. We were far enough away that we couldn't make them out really well, but what we could see was a line of figures walk out of the open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights. They began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move towards us and the hill.
Wow.
We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our stuff, and ran to the tracks.
I guess so.
There, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had came from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically, like whoever was holding them was shaking them. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights and came to a road. By our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down, and we walked there. Got to a 24-hour gas station and called my wife to come get us.
God dang it!
My wife and other friends all just thought it was kids messing around, but I heard those voices and they sure as hell didn't sound like kids to me.
No.
Not sure who those people were, but it was definitely the creepiest thing that happened to me out in the woods.
Dang! Woo! Look. That's the, oh my God, that is creepy, man. So, look, if you're going to camp or anything nowadays, use technology a little bit. I know you're trying to rough it or whatever. Bring a phone, man. Bring a phone. Walking 15 minutes to get help is too long. It's way too, without a vehicle and without a phone. Look, I'm a country boy, but I still know that what if something would have happened? What if he would have fell down the hill and cut himself and he needed medical help, you know? And things out in the woods, you can never tell. People litter and leave all kind of stuff all over. All it takes is one bad trip and fall and you can really hurt yourself. I remember I was a kid with my grandfather on my mom's side, and me and my grandfather were fishing, and I fell in the lake, and there was some rusted metal in the water, and I cut myself wide open. In fact, I still got the scar. I know you probably can't see it, but it's like right there, yeah, that little line right there. It cut me deep, y'all. I remember I was I was scared to death. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna bleed, you know. And it didn't do any serious damage, but it was definitely a bad enough cut for us to leave that fishing trip, you know. Nowadays, you have the technology available, man. You got to use it. Anyway, bruh, cults. Wow. I wonder what they were doing out there. That's running down the tracks with flashlights like that. That would have threw me for a loop too. Anyway, I hope y'all really enjoyed the story, guys. Make sure to head on over to Spook's channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and make sure to subscribe to this channel if you like reaction videos like this. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off, and we'll see you next time.